All set, Senator.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Today, we are going to hear some House bills in the Senate Education Committee. But first, I will have to read this right to know script. I'm Senator Ruth Ward from Senate District 8. Today, we will be holding a meeting of the Senate Education Committee. Before we get started, I'll read through the checklist to ensure that the meeting that we are holding is in compliance with the right to know law. As chair of the Education Committee, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04 and its extensions, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. In accordance with the emergency order, I am confirming that 1, we are providing public access to the meeting by telephone with additional access possible by video and other electronic means. We are utilizing Zoom for this electronic meeting. All members of the committee and selected legislative staff have the ability to communicate contemporaneously in this meeting through this platform. And the public has access to contemporaneously watch and or listen to the meeting on Zoom or YouTube and via phone by following the directions and links provided on the General Court website. 2, we have provided public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting in the Senate calendar. 3, we are providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are problems with access. If anyone has a problem, please email remotesenate, one word, at leg.state.nh.us or call 603-271-6931. 4, in the event the public is unable to access, the meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled. 5, please note that all votes taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. Finally, let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance. When each member states their presence, please also state where they are and if anyone else in the room with them during the meeting, which is required under the right to know law. I will call the roll. Senator Hennessy.
Good morning, Erin Hennessy from Littleton. I am home alone in the room.
Senator Ricciardi.
Good morning, everyone. Denise Ricciardi, and I'm home alone in our home in Bedford.
Senator Khan.
Good morning, and I'm President Keene in my home. My wife is elsewhere in the house.
Senator Prentice.
Good morning, Senator Prentice. I'm at my home in West Lebanon, New Hampshire, and my husband is in the home, but not in this room.
And I'm Ruth Ward, and I am District 8. I am in my home and started. My husband is in the house, but I'm alone in the room. Thank you all very much. Okay, let's look at the House bills. And we're going to start with House Bill 110. Is Representative Smith here to introduce the bill?
Yes.
Representative Smith.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Good morning. Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the committee for hearing me today. I'm Representative Stephen Smith, Sullivan County District 11, Ackworth, Charlestown, Goshen, Langdon, Webster, and Washington. This is a simple transparency bill that moves the education payments from going directly to the school districts, directly to the towns. So what happens now is the Department of Education figures out what the state aid is going to be for each town. They aggregate that, they send it to the school districts. The school districts figure out what each town owes, they deduct the state aid, the town cuts a check for the balance. Now, I don't know if you remember last term, we sent a lot of money to the towns for education property tax relief. The governor was in the press and said that. Many of us were in the press and said that. Unfortunately, it's not what happens, not how it felt to the towns, because the way the statutes are written, the Department of Education can't send the money to the towns. They send it to the school districts, who then tell the towns, well, here's how much you got. And then the towns can cut a check for the rest. Now, there's a process in the middle of that where rightfully those school boards go, that's a lot of money. And we do have these backlog projects. So let's talk to the towns about taking some of those off the backlog and using some of this money for that. I can tell you that in many of the towns that I've talked to, there was a little resentment. They saw all these press reports and thought the money was coming to them. And then there's this waypoint, this stop along the way. What this bill proposes is that we eliminate that and get rid of that opportunity for there to be resentment in what should be a nice open conversation. The school districts can still pitch those backlog projects, and they should, but the burden of proof will lie more on them to sell it, to tell the towns, look, you received all this extra money. Here are these projects we want to do in future years or months. And this is a good opportunity to do that without spiking a budget down the road. So that's all the bill does. The next time that we have a measure that says, we're going to send you a pile of money for education property tax relief, this will actually make it so. It will be felt that way. And it is their money. I'm just proposing that it goes back to them next time. So that's really all I have. It's a relatively simple and I hope non-controversial bill, and I hope you can support House Bill 110. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Anybody from the committee want to ask questions of Stephen Smith? Senator Prentice.
Thank you, Chairman Ward, and good morning, Representative Smith. Nice to have you here this morning. I just wanted to ask a question. I understand what you're saying, and I'm wondering if you considered keeping this the way that it is, but putting certain guidelines or putting it in law exactly how the transaction will take place between the school districts and the municipalities. I'm trying to. So instead of saying to municipalities, here the money is going to go to you and you can put it to property tax relief and back to the schools, why don't you just tell the school districts exactly how this is going to, how the funding is going to be managed within their district, their community?
Not sure I quite got my head around your question, but let me take a swing at it. So one of the biggest misconceptions too is what is the bill and how much did we help with it? So there are many municipalities that believe that the school district bill itself is fluctuating up and down because they see it after the state aid is calculated in. You only have to look at some of the recent newspaper reports on a massive reduction in state education aid. And that's not true. We sent one-time money, but the way it was felt by the towns was we get all this money, this time we're not. And I believe that part of that is because they don't actually see the tuition bill. What does it cost to pay their bill to the school district? And I think that if they saw that and then saw the state money coming in, it'd just make it a lot easier. And really, I prefer that the money actually go to the town because it changes the basis for the conversation. I don't think I got you there, did I?
No, I actually follow, not even just a follow-up yet. No, I do. I think you did get me there. I just am trying to understand the switch. And I think you've explained the switch. My real question is there a way to keep it as it is now and, provide more, guidance in statute, or has that been ruled out altogether and you feel that this is the only resolution to this feeling or this concern that you've heard raised?
Yeah, I'm not sure what a guideline would look like because you kind of want the flexibility because there are towns that may go, yeah, let's do that $200 million project. And the only guideline I could think of is that the district would be required to credit all of the money received, if we do extra one-time money, and I think we will, that all has to go back to the municipality, and then they have to have another conversation. Okay, how much is that going to go back to the district for this project? It just seems more complex that way. Very simple. Here's your bill, and here are the extra things that we're going to put them on as warrant articles or in the budget or whatever, and the town has the money, pay the bill. It just seems a lot easier that way.
Okay, thank you, Representative Smith. I may have more questions, but I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else from the committee? Senator Khan. You're muted.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Madam Chair. And greetings, Representative Smith. I miss running into you. So have you had some conversations with towns that do receive the direct checks for their school districts?
No, the Department of Education told me that they're not allowed to send them directly to the towns with the way the statute is currently.
Yeah, I believe there are some towns like a Manchester or where it is going to the city, where the city acts as the school board. So I'll take that probably not. Are you aware of problems that they may have with their special education redistributions that go to the town and have to make their way to the school district?
No, I'm sorry, Senator. No, I'm not.
Yeah. That's been a problem in the past, I think. The one-time money that you're referring to in the budget this past year, was that related to the municipal aid portion of the budget?
No, and that's why it went to the school districts rather than towns. We also did municipal aid on a much smaller scale.
Right. So you're referring to the fiscal capacity disparity aid then, right?
Yep. Yes.
And were you aware that of the 98 towns that received funding from fiscal capacity disparity aid, that 63 of them actually reduced their taxes?
Yes, after what I can tell you in Fall Mountain District was a very contentious and unnecessary brawl of a discussion. That's the type of thing that I'm trying to eliminate with this bill, where people rightfully or wrongly see the district trying to claw this money away from them. And that's not what they're doing. It just puts it on an unnecessarily contentious basis. I think this is much simpler. Here's the bill for your normal bill. Here are the extra things we'd like to do. And now let us sell you on why you should pay that bill. That's not what's happening now.
Any other questions?
Yeah, last one. Did if I may, have you consulted with the Municipal Association about the change?
No, I have not.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you, Mr.
Representative Smith. Do we have somebody from the list here that wants to talk to the bill?
Yes, I have 4 people signed up, and the first person is Barrett Christina.
Mr. Christina.
Good morning, members of the committee. Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Barrett Christina from the New Hampshire School Boards Association. We are opposed to House Bill 110. I want to thank Representative Smith for his explanation, both before this committee and also when it was in in-house education because I wasn't quite clear of the intent or the purpose. And I'd like to respectfully disagree with a couple points that Representative Smith mentioned. He said this was a simple transparency bill. NHSBA would contend that the transparency with which Representative Smith speaks to is already apparent. The documents are public records, the expenditures are public records, the warrant articles are public records, the DRA filings are all public records that the school district, still maintains and puts together. So I'm not sure how this necessarily increases transparency when the questions that members of the public may have can already be answered by the school district, either the superintendent or the business manager or the school board or whoever the inquiry comes to. Senator Khan, you asked if Representative Smith had contacted the Municipal Association. That was one of the questions that I had. I think one of the concerns that NHSBA would have, and I can't speak to towns and municipalities, but it's certainly my understanding that in many small towns in New Hampshire, the town office is open for maybe 4 or 5 hours a week, and they're not always fully staffed. So we're going to be putting the responsibility now on these towns of managing hundreds of millions of dollars of state adequacy aid when that money is already being managed in an efficient and actuarially sound manner for school districts currently. We think this would put a significant burden on town offices that is not necessary. I think it would be prudent if we asked the towns if they actually want this bill and they want to take on this responsibility. And I'd also like to point the committee to RSA 198:5. This statute comes up for NHSBA from time to time. This statute is the statute that states the town does the assessing for your local property taxes, not your state, not your education property tax, not your swept money. And then once that money is calculated, the money that the selectmen are supposed to pay over to the school district, the money upon demand of the school district. I can tell you that does not happen in every town on a smooth operating procedure. Every year NHSBA gets some inquiries, not a lot, but there's always 2 or 3 towns that seem to be holding on to the money for one reason or another and not paying the money over to the town or to the school district when the school district, rightfully demands their money under RSA 198:5. And I'd like to point you to a news article. This is from December 8th of 2019. This is in the Union Leader. The Governor Wentworth School District is asking a judge to order selectmen to provide $8.5 million to cover the town's share of costs to operate the school district. The school district filed suit in Carroll County Superior Court claiming that selectmen have refused to make OSAP's payments to the school district treasurer in violation of state law. Again, I know that's not common, but it happens every year within a couple of districts where the town refuses to pay over the money, and it always gets paid over eventually. But basically, the school district has to get their lawyer. The lawyer has to send a nasty letter. The town attorney sends a nasty letter back, and then the money gets paid. So there's a lot of extra rigmarole in there that happens unnecessarily. So with that, NHSBA opposes the bill. We think it's not necessary. We think it's creating unnecessary burdens on towns while interrupting a system that by and large works fine as it is and has worked fine for however long. RSA 198:42 in its current form has been in place. So with that, I thank you for hearing my testimony. I'm happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you, Mr. Christina. Any questions from the committee? Senator Prentice. You're muted.
Okay, my turn to be muted. All right, we'll work on this today. Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Christina, thank you once again. Getting to know your voice well. I want to try to go, I'm going back to Representative Smith's testimony to see if I can clarify this a little bit more. He had said, Representative Smith stated that when these funds come to the school districts, that the school districts, well, part of the purpose of this bill is that the funds go to the school districts, that they take their part and may use some of it for outstanding projects, not for, say, the adequacy aid, and then move forward. And what he's trying to do is bring this to the municipality, so it is given back to the schools specifically for the purpose that it came for. That's what I heard. So what I'm trying to understand is, what are they using it for? And in a very just simplistic way, if that's a concern, is there a way to structure the relationship so that it says, when this comes in, this is exactly what you can use it for, between the municipality and the school district, leaving it with the school district and clarifying that piece, that it's not used for anything that it wasn't targeted for. I don't like using the word targeted, but designed for, designated for in the first place.
Thank you for the question, Senator Prentice. I think NHSBA's answer to that would be that the adequacy aid, the state adequacy aid raised by your statewide education property tax and some other contributions, as expressed in House Bill 110 and as expressed in RSA 19842, your adequacy aid is only used for your adequate education costs. It's for your textbooks and for your paying your teachers and things related to direct education, transportation, things of that nature. The quote unquote extra stuff, however you want to phrase that, that would be derived from local property taxes. So, you know, your state adequacy aid is paying for the delivery of an adequate education. The football team is being raised by local property taxes.
Right.
The field trips, to Washington, D.C. that the kids, take for a weekend in 8th grade or in high school, outside of local, fundraising and all that sort of stuff. That's your local property taxes. Extracurricular clubs, things that are not required by law as part of an adequate education. That's all local property tax raised money, which the town already assesses and collects anyway. So I'm not sure how the aspect of depriving local school districts of their adequacy aid somehow relates to the quote unquote extra stuff, whether or not that's repairing the roof or fixing the boiler or buying a new school bus. So I think that's my simplest answer, is that the adequacy aid can only be used for an adequate education. The stuff beyond that is raised locally, and we already have a process in place that's run through the town or the municipality as it is.
Senator Prentice?
Follow-up. Thank you, Mr. Christina. Understood. So when you say depriving, do you think that if it goes to the municipalities first, that is where the depriving may happen or does happen?
Thank you for the question again, Senator. As I testified a couple of minutes ago, it does happen from time to time where towns refuse to pay over the money with respect to the issue. It always gets paid over in the end. I'm not saying, it's not like they're just keeping it, not paying. It always gets paid over at the end. But, I've certainly run into situations where town is refusing to pay over the town money, and the district has to make payroll in a week. And and they're short on that money. And then again, so the lawyers have to get involved, and you're creating a rigmarole where I don't think there needs to be one.
Thank you very, very much for your time, Mr. Christina. It was very helpful. Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Senator Khan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Christina, are you familiar with the Manchester special education issue that I'd mentioned? And I just use that as an example. I've heard from other special education directors that because those dollars are in arrears, meaning that they're paid the year after the expenses have taken place, that those payments get hung up. They're not made in a timely way. Sometimes municipalities will question, the necessity for the payment. In any case, is that I mean, that's an example of one of those ways in which I think this kind of example that is part of Senate Bill 110 has not worked out the way that school districts had thought that it would.
Thank you for the question, Senator. Specifically relative to the Manchester issue with which you speak, no, I'm not familiar with that. I guess my question, though, just would be the special ed aid that you are specifically referencing. Is that state money, local money, or federal money? Without knowing more about the program, I can't specifically answer that.
Yeah, and that was state money.
Okay. What was it, adequacy aid, or was it special? Was it? I'm sorry, I don't mean to be questioning you, Senator. I know the witnesses are not supposed to be questioning the senator, so I apologize. But
Well,
you know, was it adequacy aid, or was it money from the money, the $138 million, you know, additional aid that came in from last biennium? I don't think it would be adequacy aid.
no, it's categorical aid.
The CAT aid. So I don't know. I haven't
Let me
reviewed.
explain for the committee. That's state categorical aid, part of the $32 million that's allocated for special education reimbursement.
Sure. Thank you for the clarification on that, Senator. And I apologize for not knowing more about the issue in Manchester with which you speak. But again, what used to be known as the catastrophic special education aid is now just called special education aid, is not adequacy aid. Adequacy aid is being addressed in House Bill 110 and RSA 19842. I believe the catastrophic aid is a completely different statute. And I don't know how that's just dispersed or distributed, Senator, without looking at the statute.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Christina.
Thank you, Senator.
Who wants to speak next?
Caitlin Davis.
Caitlin Davis. Caitlin Davis from the DOE, welcome.
Thank you for taking my testimony. Good morning. For the record, I'm Caitlin Davis. I'm a director at the Department of Education. And I just wanted to provide a few comments for feedback for the committee, as well as potentially some suggestions. So the Department of Education, as far as for the work right now, the Department of Education distributes adequacy to school districts, meaning we calculate it by municipality, roll it up by school district, and make the payment to the school district. We make the payments 4 times a year. This is important because just to let you know that the number of payments we're actually making to school districts. So we make a payment on September 1st every year, November 1st, January 1st, and April 1st. So those payments are made directly from the Department of Education to the school districts. We are not in the habit of paying municipalities, although we certainly can do that with our statewide systems. Other state departments do pay municipalities. The Department of Education does publish a report on our website every year of adequacy aid by municipality, in addition to the school district number. So that information is available on the Department of Education website each year if people have questions and or concerns. If this bill is to pass, we do have a couple suggestions for the committee. One thing that we think would be helpful would be, even though the bill right now does say the municipality shall give the money to the school district, putting a number of days that it must be remitted by would be helpful, especially, with Mr. Christina, when he talked about the concerns that, school districts might have issues making payroll and whatnot. So a number of days that the money shall be remitted might be helpful. And then additionally, some consequences or resolution process if the money is not remitted in a timely manner, because the Department of Education does not have the capacity to field calls from 200 school districts across the state that have not received money from 250 municipalities. So some sort of resolution process or something like that would be helpful. In addition, if though if this legislation is to pass, the Department of Education would suggest that you modify an additional part of the adequacy funding formula. So this funding formula, this bill itself changes the way that the payment is made, but the funding formula itself still references a calculation by ADMA, which is average daily membership and attendance, meaning the place where the kid attends. So we would suggest that the entire formula strike out ADMA and use ADMR instead of ADMA. So we have drafted a copy of that and sent it to the committee for a proposed amendment if you do intend on passing this legislation. And lastly, I just want to point out, so this legislation does not change the way that the money can be spent. All it is changing the way that the money is, or the Department of Education cuts the checks. So school districts would still prepare a budget and appropriate the money as they see appropriate and passed by their voters. And then the department would just cut the check to the municipality rather than the school district, and the municipality now would be responsible for sending the money directly to the school district. So I'll take any questions if the committee has any.
Any questions from the committee? Senator Khan.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Davis, for taking the question. School districts and municipal boundaries, they're quite different, right?
Yes.
And there are some towns that are members of multiple school districts, right?
Yes.
And there are some school districts that have multiple towns that are members of their district, right?
Yes, that's correct.
So it seems that by cutting the check directly to the school district, it eliminates the potential for commingling of dollars and confusion that might arise. I guess that was the question.
I mean,
by cutting the check to the school district, it minimizes the confusion of the separate the difference and boundaries and multiple districts.
that would be a question that could be better answered by a school district or a municipality. From the Department of Education's perspective, we can cut the check to one or the other because we have the data on each.
Okay. Are you aware of complaints that have been given to the department about the distribution of dollars?
We've had a few over the years, mostly concerning the enrollment projections that school districts have, or say maybe the understanding of how much each town is receiving, where we typically direct the person complaining to our report on our website, the municipal report that shows how much each school district is getting for a certain number of kids. Or sorry, each municipality is receiving for a certain number of kids.
Okay.
That sounds like something that could happen regardless of the way that the check is cut.
There will be always complaints that the Department of Education fields about no matter what we do, so.
Well, thank you. It doesn't sound like we've had major problems with the way that we are distributing it currently.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Any other questions from committee members? Then I have a question. I met with you yesterday because there was some concern that if this bill were to go through, there were some major changes that needed to be done to the RSA. Do you want to address that?
Absolutely. So that's kind of what I was referencing with if this legislation is to go through, this legislation changes the payment. So it changes the payment from being made to the school district to the municipality. However, the first part of the equation in the law, so starting at RSA 198.38, talks about ADMA. And that ADMA should change to ADMR for the full purpose of the calculation, just to change the formula all the way through, rather than just changing the end of the formula. Because essentially what happens right now is the Department of Education does the calculation by municipality, we wrap it up by school district, and we make the payments to the school district. If we left the law and the proposal in place, it would require the Department of Education to essentially make the payment do the calculation by municipality, wrap it up by school district, and then unwrap it and then send it out to the municipality. So it doesn't make a ton of sense. If this is to pass, the Department of Education is planning that we will have to develop a report that will go to each school district and to each municipality to each municipality that will say exactly how much money they have to remit to each school district. So we will have to develop that additional report. It's not a ton of work for the department, and once we do it once, it's pretty easy to go forward doing that, but that's what we will have to do. And right now, even though we have a municipal level report on the Department of Education website, that is an annual report. So we will have to do reports now when we're making our 4 times a year payments too. So that will be a new adjustment we will have to make.
And this adjustment would not have a fiscal impact?
We don't believe it would have a fiscal impact at all, not for the Department of Education. And assuming that funding was remitted, as the bill says, to the school district by municipality, there should be no fiscal impact other than administrative burden for the municipalities and potential school districts.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Senator Prentice? You're muted.
Sorry, thank you, thank you, Madam Chair. And Caitlin, thank you for being with us this morning. This is a little bit of a statement and a little bit of a question. I just keep going back to this. So I just heard Senator Khan had asked you, if you'd had, complaints or concerns that were, say, bubbling up in this area. We're hearing a lot of concerns. And you said there were always complaints or concerns that come forward to DOE, but not necessarily about this, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay. So I want to hit that as number one, because I'm not still completely sold that there's a need to change the way the payments are made. If there's a concern about how it's done now, rather than have you upend the process as you just described, which it might not have a, say a fiscal note in terms of, I call this kind of fiscal note like the shop rate. It's work internally that needs to get done. Is there a way, if there is a true concern that's been raised here, to fix the process as is with the way the money's still going to the districts, with further guidance or statutory language, rather than switch this to the municipal side and upend the process as is? So I think it's taken me a while to get myself completely there, but that's what I've been trying to get at pretty much all morning. Like, do we need to do this? Can we just take the process as is if there's really a problem and fix that versus changing the entire system, which I heard you just give the steps out on what would need to happen internally to get that done. Sounds like it's doable, but the big question is this necessary? That's all. Thank you. I'm going to work on my muting issue this morning. Thank you.
So the department can't answer whether this is or not is not necessary. That would be for maybe school districts and municipalities and taxpayers to answer. So from the Department of Education's perspective, it doesn't really affect our processes.
Follow up?
But you did state that you would have to make changes to the way the payments are made.
Yeah, I mean, yes, but it's no different than changes that we make on a regular basis anyways. I mean, we are constantly changing our processes for adequacy. For example, this past year, when you all added the new one-time aid, that required quite a bit of changes. The year before, we added in new full-day kindergarten, that required quite a bit of changes. So as far as our normal, regular adequacy preparation process, these changes would be probably likely no different and just incorporated in our annual adequacy process.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarification. Thank you very much. I'm done.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Caitlin. And I'm assuming we can call on you if we need some more.
Yes, I'll
information?
stay on here for the rest of the hearing.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Do we have somebody else wanting to speak?
Yes, next we have Winfred Feneberg.
Okay. Mr. Feneberg, welcome.
Thank you very much. Honorable members of Senate Ed, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Thank you. I'm here this morning to testify in opposition to House Bill 110. Some of the previous speakers have taken some of my thunder, but I just want to briefly concentrate on what the issue would be for a regional school district or a multi-town cooperative school district. As the superintendent of SAU 65, the Kearsarge Regional School District, it is my testimony that this bill would affect negatively a system of school funding that works well and provides us with fiscal stability. House Bill 110 seeks to replace this system with a new method that is cumbersome, far less efficient, and only designed to add bureaucratic and administrative hurdles where currently none exist. In particular, this change would place an undue burden on cooperative and multi-town districts like mine. Currently, as you know, the district receives adequacy grants directly from the state in the prescribed sequence and in the amounts designed 4 times per fiscal year. And RSA 198.42 was quoted. So 4 grant transactions directly from the state to the district. In SAU 65, House Bill 110 would replace those 4 transactions with 56 transactions and 56 individual ones. Each of our 7 constituent municipalities in the Kearsarge district would receive 4 installments of adequacy payments from the state. So there's 28 transactions, and then need to transfer those funds to the district, 28 more transactions. I cannot believe that your committee would willingly endorse a 14-fold increase of administrative and financial effort to achieve really no improvement of current practice. Additionally, I would ask you to consider that the bill, under the best of circumstances, will only preserve the status quo of timely payments of adequacy grants to the district. More likely, as previous speakers have pointed out, it will create additional burden and financial uncertainty for school districts. And particularly if municipalities delay payment for any reason. Now, in my tenure in Kearsarge over the last 6 years, that has not happened. But I was made aware by our business administrator that that has occurred indeed in our district as well, that we had to urge individual member towns to send payments, their local tax payments to us. I can only imagine that if this were the case, that every town receives their portion, then have to send it, that the risk for that would just increase. So again, this bill disproportionately negatively affects cooperative districts whose business offices would find themselves in the unfortunate role of needing to solicit and chase adequacy payments in case of untimely fund transfers by individual towns. So all said and done, I would respectfully ask you to oppose this bill and not send it on. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Feneberg. Questions from the committee members? If you want to speak, Senator Khan, you're muted.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Superintendent Feneberg. I think you explained it pretty clearly. The Kearsarge is an independent taxing district. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
And by result of that, you're able to receive one check 4 times a year to do to be reimbursed by the state for your adequate education costs. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. And really, this is about the adequacy portion of the education funding. We still work with all our 7 towns to get the local tax portion, and we have a good relationship with them. So that, like I said, has not been a problem. But I can anticipate for some cooperative districts with smaller towns that could indeed be at least delaying the proper payments.
Well, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Feneberg. Any other questions from the committee? Thank you very much for your testimony.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Next, we have Becky Benvenuti.
Ms. Benvenuti, welcome.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we do.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Becky Benvenuti, and I'm the Government Finance Advisor for the New Hampshire Municipal Association, and we are opposed to House Bill 110. This legislation would not benefit towns and cities. In fact, the bill would create an unfunded additional requirement for municipalities to act as a type of clearinghouse for the school district funds which are completely unrelated to town and city governmental operations. We oppose this legislation for a variety of reasons. As you all know, municipalities and school districts are separate and distinct political subdivisions and separate and distinct legal entities. And as such, towns and cities do not have any powers to control the acceptance or expenditure of any non-municipal revenues other than the collection and transfer of local and state school property tax and county tax amounts. Adequate education grant funds, of course, do benefit the residents of a town or city by providing educational funding. However, these grant funds do not benefit the government of a town or city operation. And these educational funds cannot be used to provide local municipal property tax relief. Requiring that the school funds first be distributed to towns and cities would, as it's previously been stated, would delay the traditional receipt of funds by the school districts. We believe this bill would create a great deal of unintended confusion. As Ms. Davis pointed out, the bill does not specify a timeline for a town or city to transfer these funds to the appropriate school district. And the bill does not address how any discrepancy in the amount of funds would be resolved. Most importantly, whether the town or city would now have any liability. Adequate education grants would not be considered revenue to towns and cities. This would require towns and cities to establish a system that ensures that these non-municipal funds are properly deposited and then accounted for as a liability that is due to the school district. So the receipt and disbursement of adequate education grants would require additional governmental reporting, internal controls, and financial auditing requirements, both for the town or the city and the school district. And this bill requires that this new cumbersome process for administering this system would be required to be repeated 4 times each year, as has previously been stated. So for all these reasons, we respectfully ask that you vote HB 110 ITL. And I would be, of course, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Benvenuti. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Testimony.
The last person that I had signed up to speak was Carl Ladd. However, I don't see him on the list. If you're here, please raise your hand. And if you're dialing in on the phone, you can dial *9 to raise your hand. And if there's anyone else that wanted to speak to House Bill 110, now would be the time to raise your hand. Not seeing any hands, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Sonia. That concludes the hearing on House Bill 110. Next, we have House Bill 242. Is Representative Ladd here to address that bill?
Yes.
Mr. Ladd, welcome.
I think you need to unmute yourself.
Rick, you are muted.
Madam Chair?
Yeah.
Representative Ladd had asked me to let him know when we were back in, so I just texted him to let him know, so he might actually not be with us just yet.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Can you hear me? I'm back, Aaron.
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. For the record, my name is Rick Ladd. I am representative from Haverhill, New Hampshire, Grafton 4. I'm here today to introduce HB 242. Jumping in between exec sessions in the House Education and jumping into this out and in here.
I know.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. HB 242 is a bill which adds and defines elements associated with the opportunity for an adequate education. The bill, if you have it in front of you, speaks to the criteria for an adequate education, and we've made a few changes in that particular section of the bill where we speak to the opportunity to acquire and apply knowledge and skills. In Roman 3 on that, which is on the second page that I have, it applies knowledge and skills in the area of biological, physical, and earth sciences. And we reference specifically engineering and socioeconomic and geopolitical challenges around us. This suggestion came from the Cold Regions Lab in Hanover, New Hampshire, where they're dealing with engineering studies, dealing with changes in our world, which are having to be met through engineering understanding and the socioeconomic and geopolitical challenges that face the world. And one of the focuses they gave me was the increasing levels of ocean down in New Orleans, and then also the melting of the permafrost in Alaska and the Northern Hemisphere, how that's changing the way people live. It's changing how we address medicine. It's changing the geopolitical challenges which we have in terms of who owns that area up north, the Northwest Passage area, the minerals in there, how we deal with permafrost, which is now shrinking significantly. Our polar ice cap is totally shrinked over half in the last 20 years. And so we need to look at these challenges and understand them around us. So we put that in the bill. Going down to the substantive content of an adequate education. Defining adequate education has been modified to say that the opportunity for an adequate education shall be defined as rigorous academic study and applied learning in the following core domains. And these core domains are in law right now. However, we've further expanded on what the sciences are to reflect what we have in ED 306, meaning biology, physical science, and earth sciences. We've expanded the social studies terminology to get back to where we have been in years past with civics and government, economics, geography, and history. We feel that it's very important to have these topics taught in schools, and that the concept of social studies, sometimes these subjects are not really presented as a real part of our world around us, and we'd like to see them emphasized. Going further, we look at health, and we also want to associate wellness with health. So we've said health and wellness. We've kept everything else except we've added a J, which we've had so many concerns brought to the Education Committee in past years, personal finance literacy, which we also have in ED 306. And we feel it's important that young people, as well as adults, understand personal finance, how to balance your checkbook. So this is what we call the substantive content of an adequate education. Those areas right there are the areas that we address when we're talking about adequacy. Now, going further, we've also said and taken out computer science and digital literacy as separate topics. We have come from the perspective that these skills are now taught in everything we teach. You have to know how to use a computer in terms of looking at your world. You need to have a computer in terms of geography or biology or physics or world languages. So we've said that there are certain skills which need to be emphasized throughout all our subjects: computer science and digital literacy, and logic and rhetoric. Now, the logic is thinking skills, it's reasoning skills. And every one of these areas requires research. And so, and we've heard this from our CTE centers, that we want folks to know how to reason and think and analyze and recognize fact from fiction. Secondly, rhetoric. If you were to go talk to the directors of the career technical education centers now, or principals in schools, what do we want students to be able to do in terms of communication skills? We want them to be able to speak and communicate in written format in a way that it's understood by the person they're delivering that message to. So communication skills are absolutely necessary, and they're taught throughout all those sub-content areas of a substantive education. Going down to part 4 in that bill, we deal with one area which has been discussed a great deal in the past 3 or 4 years. It deals with, upon receiving a valid completion certificate from a state board approved alternative program, a high school under RSA 194.23 shall grant equivalent high school credit leading to graduation to a student has completed such alternative program. That's also in the part C there underneath. There's a B and a C. What we are saying is that the state board approves some alternative situations like the Learn Everywhere program, and those are considered part and acceptable as an alternative way of learning and should be part of our adequate program or the content of. Going down here, I'm rushing. I know I apologize for jumping around here a little bit. Further in the cost of an adequate education, RSA 193E2B is looked at. And I've been a member of the 2018 task force, which looked at financing and setting up how we fund adequate education, and the recent commission for that, which occurred over the last year. I'm also very familiar with the funding formula that came out of the 2008 Joint Legislative Committee for determining an adequate education and the costing of an adequate education. This changes in this bill reflect exactly what has been recommended out of the 2008 and the 2018 studies. Base cost. Base cost is that cost which is needed for all students, all the general education students, to receive a substantive education content for an opportunity for an adequate education. The base cost is not including that area, which are areas which are the differentiated aid. We're maintaining our costing formula as we have done in the past. And we're basing it on base cost, which is an input-driven system where we identify, as I heard the State School Boards Association mention before, that there's some items that are reflected on the DOE 25 form, which are not adequate, that are defined as an adequate education. I.e., I heard football trips, field trips, items that are specified as optional within our statutes. Those are not part of adequacy. The state's responsibility is to provide the base adequacy, and for those students which have additional needs, such as special education, English language learners, or they're economically disadvantaged, we provide differentiated aid. And differentiated aid for the economically disadvantaged in this bill is handled in 2 ways. We look at the equalized property valuation per pupil in towns. So we're trying to understand the needs in property poor towns, as well as the needs in property wealthy towns. Second part here in this formula, or in this costing scenario, is that we recognize when we did the achievement scores assessments of all our districts in this state, we know that there's a higher chance of students not being proficient in a community that is a lower level of equalized property valuation, below $1 million per student. We have some districts, such as a Moulton Borough, for example, that has $7 million per pupil, but then we go to some of the poorer districts and it's down close to $300,000-$400,000 per pupil. They obviously cannot provide, they need support, they need some help to eliminate some of the disparities and inequities which we have. But we also know on the other end of the spectrum, there are students in communities which have high property values, but that the medium incomes or the achievement levels which are associated with medium incomes are low. There's large pools of students in those that are not above the proficiency level. So that spells out the second part of differentiated aid, this disparity achievement proficiency aid grant. Next, we have in the bill under 1A, the definition of what base cost is. You need to identify base cost. We cannot simply take our DOE 25 form, which is the report which every district submits to the Department of Education, and it lists their assets, their revenues, and their expenses. You cannot take the total of the expenses and divide and find the average cost and say that is the average cost we should be funding all students at. First of all, the DOE 25 form recognizes all expenses submitted, whether it's your marching band, your football program, your soccer program, your field trips, all those expenses not part of adequacy. So we have identified in here, as they did back in 2008 in the Joint Bipartisan Legislative Oversight Committee, and we have identified, and you can read them in the bill. I won't go through and read all those, but all those issues are there, elements, they are there. And it's up to the legislature to define what is a base cost. This we are doing right here. It's up to the legislature to decide how we're going to fund each of those elements, whether it's the teachers in the room, if it's going to remain at a 25-to-1 for K through 2 or a 30-to-1 for grades 3 through 12, or we're going to lower that pupil teacher ratio. That is up to the legislature to do, and that probably needs to be looked at. Notice also that transportation is part of base cost. It has always been a part of base cost. We funded that back in 2008 at about $315 per student. So going on further, the last part of this bill includes a portion of accountability for this input type system, where the commissioner is responsible for submitting a report each November 1, in which that report would identify those communities which are not able to comply with this section of statute. And in addition, we feel that the best way that accountability can be had is that you communicate that accountability to parents. And so with that, the schools which are not able to meet the input accountability system would then be notified, and they would put it up on their websites, be it the school district, the charter school websites, et cetera, and notify parents in writing that this school does not provide all the inputs and all the adequate education required by statute. So thank you, Madam Chair. That goes through this bill. And I'm willing to answer any questions. I know you're on a tight line. You're a little bit over your time right now, so I will finish.
Thank you very much. That was a very thorough going over of the bill. Any questions from the committee members? Senator Hennessy.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Ladd. I know you're super busy, but did any portions of this have discussions of having a fiscal impact when you had the hearings in the House?
We thank you very much, Senator Hennessy. I keep wanting to call you representative. Thank you. Yes, we did. We had a bill 608. Unfortunately, we did not get the fiscal analysis or that report for that until we were at the deadline. This was an early bill, and it had to be not 242, but the 608 was an early bill. We had to have that out of committee. The numbers in the calculator that is now had, we didn't have at that point in time. So we could not, juggle those numbers around to come up with a level of adequacy funding that's affordable. You have to understand that by changing base cost, even by $1,000 or $2,000 for each student, that will jump the cost for education significantly because it applies across the board. For example, if we were to fund all students at a level of $6,000 per child or 5,000 plus at the neighborhood that came out of the commission, base cost and differentiated aid would basically increase our budget close to $1 billion annually. That is, it's not affordable unless we're going to start looking at an alternative way of revenues. That would be your income tax, sales tax, capital gains tax, et cetera, which the funding commission didn't have the stomach for that either. So be careful when we play with the base cost. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Senator Khan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Greetings, Representative Ladd. So I guess just for starters, I disagree with your $1 billion on increasing to $5,000. I don't know that that's the nature of this bill's debate, but I just don't think that that's right. But let me ask you with some things that are more germane to this bill. On just page 3, you've identified matters that I think you're trying to link up 193E2 to 19840. And then you've added in 19840, not just A, but I guess other sections to pick up the equalized assessed valuation, or what might be called disparity aid, and then another concept related to disparities in achievement. And so first off, those are not currently part of our adequacy aid formula. Is that right?
The disparity, and then if you look, thank you very much, Senator. If you look at the bill that's proposed 242, it specifically states that the disparity, physical capacity disparity aid is above and beyond adequacy. The only areas that are part of adequacy would be your base cost and your differentiated aid.
But in this section, which is the cost of an adequate education, we're going to include items that are currently not part of the adequate education. They're additional aid in other sections of 19840, right?
This formula that you're seeing here basically replicates what we had in 2008 and came out of that study, joint study, where the physical capacity disparity aid is a separate categorical grant, which is not associated with your base or your differentiated aid. However, it is noted in this bill, seeing that we feel that this is a very important aspect to address the disparities and inequities that exist between wealthy and poorer communities. We recognize that the base and the differentiated aid components have to be sent to all students, all communities, regardless of wealth, and that's a constitutional requirement. However, the categorical grants are not that, and this is how it's intended that we address these awful disparities.
Yeah. So I suppose yes, thank you, Madam Chair. You probably know that I agree with that these are important elements to take into account in our funding. However we address the funding formula. But there is no, let's see, where do I want to go with the question? These are dollar amounts that were eliminated somewhere along the way since 2008, have reappeared again in 2021. And I suppose if we adopt this, they really ought to be a continuing portion of the adequacy calculation. That's what's being suggested here, correct?
That is correct. We're walking back to pre-2012, when at that point in time, we significantly changed how special education was funded in differentiated aid, and we ended up with a component called stabilization. And it's unanimously agreed upon by all the commission members, which you were a part of this summer with us, and folks on the education committee, that we should not return to stabilization. We need to try to stay away from as much of funding of education through a formula which is only able to meet the necessary mark by that money, which has been so contentious. So what we're trying to do is move back to pre-2012, which we at that time did have fiscal capacity disparity aid. I am one that believes that the formula that came out in 2008 would have worked if we had funded it properly. It had all the components necessary to help these towns, which are really hurting and not able to provide some of the levels of programming that the town right next door to them. Maybe it's AP courses, maybe it's those enrichment courses, maybe it's just a basic math course. So that's why we're just walking back into what we had pre-2012, when that was all removed. That 150 some odd million dollars was removed then and put in stabilization.
Thank you. If I continue, Madam Chair.
Is there anybody else on the committee who has a question before Senator Khan continues? I guess not. Yes, you have one more question.
Thank you. So I'll fold two into this one. So stabilization grants that you just mentioned, they're not mentioned in this bill, nor is there a path for reassessing base costs, which at $3,709, I think we both agree doesn't really do much to reflect what base costs are experienced. So do you have a process that you would suggest that complements this legislation to try to get us to where you're trying to aim?
Thank you, Senator Khan. Yes, I believe that if you look at those elements, those categorical elements within base cost, and we know that, for example, you heard me talk often in the commission that transportation is a significant cost factor that we're not really funding adequately. It's within the base cost. It was started initially back in 2008 at $315 per pupil. But at that point in time, we had a full bus load of students. Now with our declining population, we're seeing buses now that are half empty or 3/4 empty. And yet they're getting funded through the base cost for the number of students that they have on their enrollment. So they're having to pay their Primex, their bus labor costs, the purchasing of the bus, et cetera, all that with less money than they have in previous years. That is one component. Another component would be, do we feel that a classroom ratio in kindergarten through grade 2 is adequate at 25:1? That's a good discussion item. Or 30:1 in grades 3 through 12. I've introduced legislation in the past where I even believe intermediate levels of education for the elementary grades needs to be lower than 30:1. That's just a very difficult PTR. So what we need to do, the legislature is the one that decides what an adequate education is. The legislature needs to take the next step forward and to have a comprehensive look at these elements within base cost what you're seeing right here are the elements that came out of the 2008 study and that were endorsed in the 2018 study. We need to look at those and make sure those are appropriate. Obviously, the cost of technology now is nowhere near what it was back in 2008. And there's another reason why this has to be looked at. We're seeing the same thing happening with other categorical areas like career technical education, special education, special education aid, the old CAT aid. So we have our work in front of us we have to address, and much of it is in whether we keep this as a categorical aid area or we drop some of it into adequacy.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Representative Ladd. Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Madam Chair.
Next, we have Daniel Hebert.
Dan Hebert, welcome.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Hearing me okay?
Yes, we do.
Perfect. So good morning to you and the committee and to Representative Ladd. My name is Dan Hebert, State President of the New Hampshire Jumpstart Coalition. We are an all-volunteer state nonprofit organization whose singular mission is to teach kids to learn how to manage their money. And we've been doing this for over 20 years. We are pleased to support House Bill 242 because of the addition of financial literacy to the definition of an adequate education. Over the past 20 years, we have experienced significant changes in financial services, products, and providers. The landscape of how we manage our money has never been wider. The days of passbook savings and writing checks are long behind us, only to be replaced by technology, non-bank products, and most importantly, a culture of buy now, pay later, which has its roots back in the mid-90s when credit cards came onto the scene in a big way. We can no longer allow our children to gain money management skills through the school of hard knocks. We believe financial education in the classroom supports the efforts at home to help children become financial capable adults. We in New Hampshire are in a unique position. We are still the only state in New England with a state requirement, graduation requirement for economics, and included in the curriculum frameworks for economics is a standard for personal finance. That standard was based on the national standards for personal finance established by the National Jumpstart Coalition and has been in place here in New Hampshire since 2006. The reality, however, is that in our state of local control, there is not a uniform approach to teaching personal finance. I call to your attention our biennial study of New Hampshire high schools, which identifies who teaches what in our state. As of 2019, there were 9 school districts who, in addition to the state requirement for economics, also requires a standalone course in personal finance for graduation from their district. Those high schools are Bedford, Bow, Colebrook, Hinsdale, John Stark Regional, Linwood, Newfound Regional, Pelham, Profile, and Woodsville. We'll be updating this study over the summer and hopefully we'll be able to add to this list. Additionally, the Jumpstart Coalition maintains a clearinghouse of teaching resources. Over 800 resources are in the clearinghouse. Over half of them can be downloaded for free. And finally, for the past 20 years, New Hampshire Jumpstart has been providing financial literacy training to Granite State teachers. We also have access to a number of national resource providers like Next Gen Personal Finance, who offers free, extensive professional development opportunities for teachers. So we have approved education standards. We have teachers who want to teach it. We know students want to learn it. We have training options for teachers, and there are many free resources available to school districts and their teachers. In conclusion, the recent events over the past 6 weeks have increased the urgency of teaching money management to our kids. When the GameStop story broke a month ago, my phone blew up from teachers asking for help to describe short selling to their students who are only seeing the chance to make big money fast. And now the current explosion in cryptocurrencies is creating the same feelings for kids. You might not know this, but there are 20 Bitcoin ATMs in our state. One of them right near the State House at Fort Eddy Plaza. The whole world of digital currencies and digital assets might seem like a Star Trek episode to us, but we are looking into the future and our kids need to be prepared for it. I find it interesting that the Georgia legislature is also looking into a financial literacy bill that includes cryptocurrency. So we'll be keeping an eye on that as well. It's time to make financial literacy part of the definition of an adequate education in New Hampshire. And I thank you all for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hebert. Any questions from the committee members? I don't see one, so thank you very much, Mr. Hebert. Interesting stuff, where to find the Bitcoins. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, if there's anyone else who would like to testify on House Bill 242, please raise your hand now. And if you're dialing in on the phone, you can dial *9 to raise your hand. I don't see any. Oh.
Senator Khan?
Madam Chair, is there somebody from the Department of Education that could address these changes?
Yeah, we have somebody. I don't know, it's going to be Caitlin Davis or possibly Nate.
I don't see Caitlin in the attendees column anymore, and no one is raising their hand.
Okay.
Oh, I see someone.
Who's that, Nate?
Hi,
Yeah.
good morning. This is Nate Green. I'm the Bureau Administrator with the Department of Education.
Right. Senator Khan, did you have a question for Nate?
I do have one, maybe a couple, but Dr. Green, I know part of your responsibilities with the department, and some of the changes that are recommended here, would they need to go through rule writing?
Yes, they would. So when we talk about an adequate education, much of what schools follow in terms of the on-the-ground procedures and policies are spelled out pretty clearly within the minimum standards. That's the ED 306s. So for example, when we look at the personal finance literacy edition here, much of what's in the base education is spelled out in much greater detail within those minimum standards. And so we would want to do that, for example, with the personal finance, to let districts know kind of what are the standards around how that would be offered within their district. What would students be required to do? Does this need to be a graduation requirement? Is it not a graduation requirement? In the same way that we do that for all those other categories: arts education, world language, physical education, etc. That's one example. My guess is that there are probably several other areas in here where we would want to look to see how it impacts the current ED 306 administrative rules and go through rulemaking.
Madam Chair, continue, please.
Yes, follow up.
Would the bill does not describe a rulemaking process for the department. Is that an omission that we should be correcting?
I don't believe it would be. Let me see. I think I saw something in here. Letter C under 1 or under I talks about the State Board of Education shall adopt rules. Oh, I apologize. That's regarding alternative programs specifically. Much of what we have within the school approval standards comes from this particular RSA. So when we talk about the rules that the state board oversees and implements, we generally come back to this particular RSA 193E here in terms of the authority that we have to sort of spell out to school districts the content within each of those academic areas. But I will say I'm not an attorney.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can, if you get any clarity on that, I think it might be helpful. I've seen some legislation that we've passed that failed to have a 541A requirement for rulemaking. And I mean, what it adds is it gives transparency to the public to have input into education rules. And sometimes the department, the commissioner have come back and said we need that rule writing authorization in order to go into a 306 kind of writing. So if we had that clarity, I think we could probably figure out how to add that in. If I could add one other thing, there are some other sections that where we aren't exactly lined up with the statute. I think of, if we do something with environmental education, or we've got something now moving through on Holocaust and genocide studies. As those go through, do you think that this statute would want to be modified to reflect a consistency that it seems to be trying to get to, but is not quite lining up the opportunities for an adequate education, the substantive content for an adequate education. They're differences as we go through the bill with different parts.
Sure, and I can understand that desire for consistency. That's something that we certainly strive for here. I do think that there are many parts of the minimum standards that live throughout various other parts of the statute. So it may be difficult to bring all of the consistency together into one place. For example, minimum standards include standards around food and nutrition services, nursing services, school counseling and psychological services, that maybe have different places either in state statute or federal statutes, but they all live within minimum standards. Because when we look at a public school and what they're offering, we're really looking at the full scope of all of the different services, and they don't necessarily all have a basis right here in what an adequate education content is, if that makes sense.
Yep. We would see, if I continue with one last one here.
Last one, because we're running pretty late here.
I think we're seeing what you just said in the base costs. There are some things that have been become part of base costs, like nursing, mental health training, things that are in other statutes that aren't included here, but that's because this is a 2008 definition versus a 2021 definition. Is that what you were referring to?
I think that's a part of it as well. Yeah. And also it's likely that, we need to take a look at the minimum standards themselves. We do have a group right now that's working under a contract with the department that is viewing the entirety of the ED 306 minimum standards to look at how it lines up with current statutes and current requirements. And hopefully we'll be suggesting a revised draft of those to the department. But that's some internal work that we're doing in an effort, like you say, to try to get towards some of that consistency.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So are you letting us know about whether or not this has to be included in rules?
Yes, I will speak with Diana Fenton, who's one of our attorneys here, and we'll get clarification.
Okay, thank you very much. If there are no other questions from the committee, thank you very much for your testimony.
Madam Chair, I think that's everyone for House Bill 242.
Great. Okay, we're running late, so we're picking up 304. I see the Representative Ladd is going to be able to come back. And I think that we have another hour and a half to deal with the three bills, which are not even halfway through. So if you have a long testimony, send us the written part and just make a summary of the testimony. That would really, we would appreciate that, and that would make us able to finish up on time. Thank you very much. So Representative Ladd, you are on again.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and members of the Senate committee. For the record, my name is Rick Ladd. I am representative from Haverhill, New Hampshire, Woodsville, New Hampshire. Today, I'm here to speak towards the CTE tuition transportation funding study that we have recommended out of House Education. This recommendation also started to surface when we were looking at the commission study this past year, and it's been an item of discussion for years. Starting out, when we look at delivery of an adequate education, you are looking at approximately 14 indicators that we have identified within statute that identify whether we have students meeting the challenge of obtaining an adequate education. 3 of those indicators deal directly with career technical education. They deal with added skill and career certification. They deal with CTE industry recognized credentials and career pathways leading towards such a skill. So it's important to know that 21% of our indicators which measure delivery of an adequate education are aimed directly at the skills taught by career technical education centers and within high schools themselves. Getting down to the nuts and bolts of why this bill has come forward is that we know that there are communities within the state that receive absolutely no tuition money by way of this funding pool for CTEs, namely those school districts which have their CTE programs within the school district. Manchester is one, where there is no funding provided for their tuition of students, seeing they're already within that district, so they're not tuitioned. We have around $9 million that's allocated for reimbursement for tuition and transportation costs in this state. The first thing we do is we take care of the transportation costs, which are based upon at 10 cents per mile per student. That adds up statewide to approximately $680,000. The remaining money is used for tuition, and that's split up on a basis of 25% is paid by the local community and 75% is paid by this pool of money that's left over from the $9 million. And it's oftentimes prorated, seeing that there's more students and not adequate money. We're seeing that over and over throughout this state. The tuition costs range from $3,100 in Rochester to $7,300 in Berlin. So the costs are not uniform throughout the state. They're based upon operational costs for those career technical education centers, those 28 centers we have spread out throughout our state. And we have a number along the Connecticut River that are in Vermont, which support our students from New Hampshire. When we looked at this summer and last spring and fall here at career technical education, there was a lot of discussion on the commission whether this should remain a categorical source of revenue, or whether it's actually because of the 21% of the indicators that are identified for the delivery of an adequate education, 21% are CTE oriented. Should it become part of our adequacy formula? That we didn't get to the bottom line at within that commission, because there are certainly, it would reformulate our formula totally. But we need to start addressing and considering how we're going to fund those districts which don't receive tuition monies, but all the operational costs are on that district. Like in Manchester, they have to pay for those costs which support their students. Whereas if you're in Holderness and you're shipping your kid to the Plymouth CTE Center, Holderness provides the Plymouth CTE Center tuition. So there's a huge problem here in how we fund, and the number of students which we have participating in high schools going to CTEs is very low in this state. Approximately 14% of our high school population participates in CTE centers. Whereas when you compare yourself to a Delaware, which has a similar population as this state, 59% of their students participate in CTE, get those types of skills. And the CTE centers now should not be understood as what our old vocational program was, where we made the birdhouses and that type of thing. They are highly skilled technologically driven centers now that lead towards 2- and 4-year degrees. So I'll close the session. We recognize that, or on my presentation, we recognize that career technical education is an issue which needs address. We recognize this is a COVID season and committees are not highly sought after. However, this is one that came out of the House Education Committee unanimously. We need to move forward with this study committee. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Ladd. Any questions from the committee members? Senator Khan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative, my only question here is the size of the committee. Have you gotten any further feedback on that?
No,
Two
thanks.
senators, 7
thanks.
representatives, seems
9
larger
members.
than.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't have the bill right in front of me right now, Senator Khan. However, the size of the committee, I'm really interested in seeing some folks on that committee that have the expertise, the know-how, understand our situation. I saw what we had this summer on the commission, and there were some folks there that came out of the Advisory Council for Career Technical Education that have excellent perspectives. We have CTE directors that have excellent perspectives. However, this is not a commission, it's a committee. And those folks, I would suggest, would be those that are brought in to provide input and technical support throughout to the committee members. I don't have any preference one way or the other, Senator Khan, as how many you have on that committee or how many you don't. I just think we need to get going on it.
Mhm.
I don't disagree with you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Representative Ladd.
Thank you very much. I got to get back to executing bills. Thank you.
I bet you do. Thanks.
I don't have anyone else signed up to speak to House Bill 304. So if you would like to speak, please raise your hand now. Okay, we have Eric Froworth.
Good morning. I did not have anything prepared to speak. I just am here in case there were any additional questions that were not already addressed by that, actually, I think, really fantastic explanation that you were just presented. So I'm just here in case you had any questions.
Thank you for being available. Any questions from the committee members? I guess we're all set. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much.
So Madam Chair, I think that's it for House Bill 304.
Okay, then we'll close the public hearing on, what was it, 304? And we have, I hope, a very short one, 513. Representative Allard.
Representative Allard, if you're in the Zoom, could you please raise your hand?
Okay, this bill we have is a similar bill to what we had in the Senate, and the Senate has voted on it, and this is a vote on from the House. So I will find out exactly how 2 similar bills are going to be handled.
Madam Chair,
Pardon?
we do have one person signed up to speak on this bill. I wasn't sure if you wanted to introduce it first.
I can introduce it. This is House Bill 513. This bill requires approval by the Higher Education Commission as a prerequisite to the granting of a degree by an educational institution. The bill also authorizes Sigmund University to grant degrees subject to approval by the Higher Education Commission.
We have Corey Olson.
Okay. Mr. Olson, welcome.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Senator Ward. So I'm not going to make a speech. I know we have addressed almost exactly the same bill earlier on. And I just wanted to be here to answer any questions that anyone from the committee might have had that have arisen in the meantime since this bill was last under discussion, or rather the very similar Senate bill was under discussion.
That's right. Any questions from the committee members for Mr. Olson, who is the president of Sigmund University?
Yeah, sorry, I should have said that.
A totally online program.
That's right.
I think we have had all the questions answered by you, Mr. Olson.
Very good. Thank you. Just wanted to make myself available.
Thank you for being here. Well, if there's nothing else, then I think is there somebody else?
Yes, we do have a hand. Lori.
Okay. Lori Alden.
Good morning. Thank you very much for considering HB 513. I am a graduate of Signum University, broadcasting from Plainfield, New Hampshire, on native Coas Abenaki land. Hello, Senator Prentice. I just wanted to say thank you and also be available to answer questions from the student perspective. I'm a graduate of Signum University. Thank you.
I think we asked you some questions last time. Do we have any new questions? If not, thank you very much for being available. We heard your good story about what you had done with your degree. Well, I think if there are nobody else, that will finish the public hearing on 513. And the last bill we have here is 609. Is Representative Cordelli available?
I do not see Representative Cordelli. If you're here, please raise your hand.
Maybe he's in the other committee executing bills.
Probably.
And I think Representative Ladd has been here twice already.
We do have,
do you have somebody? I can introduce it.
If you want to introduce it, then I can move to the speakers.
Okay. This is has relative to innovation schools. The prime sponsor is Representative Cordelli. This bill permits schools and school districts to develop a plan for waiving rules to become an innovation school.
Okay. We have Megan Tuttle.
Okay. Welcome.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Okay, thank you. I know that's the horror. Everybody asked the same first question. I apologize. For the record, my name is Megan Tuttle. I'm president of NEA New Hampshire. And thank you, Chairwoman Ward and members of the Senate Ed Committee for hearing my testimony today. I come before you today to testify in opposition to House Bill 609 in relative to innovation schools. And I want to highlight some serious concerns that we have with this legislation. First, at a minimum, House Bill 609 subverts the spirit of the Every Student Succeeds Act, also known as ESSA, which holds that stakeholders should be consulted and meaningfully participate in improvement planning and implementation in our public schools and districts. At each stage of the process laid out in this proposal, meaningful involvement seems to be bypassed entirely. It lacks adequate provisions to ensure public comment, review, and participation in the development of the innovation school or innovation district plan, especially since educators are not named as a required stakeholder in any part or in a single part of the proposed legislation. Second, after bypassing valuable educator participation in the development and submission of these proposed innovation plans, the bill appears to invite the waiving of rules that directly impact the educators of a particular school district. Some of the examples of this are referenced in the proposed plan components allowable by the legislation, including page 2, line 8, where it says a description of the innovations the public school would implement, which may include but not be limited to innovations in school staffing, curriculum and assessment, class scheduling, use of financial and other resources, and faculty recruitment and employment evaluation and compensation. Also on page 3, line 24, it references teacher recruitment, training, preparation, and professional development. E, teacher employment. F, performance expectations and evaluation procedures for teachers and principals. The description of what can be waived here is both extraordinarily broad, and it includes specific aspects of employment and working conditions that are often subjects covered at the bargaining table. On page 2, line 33, the legislation goes further by asking for, under H, a description of any provision of the collective bargaining agreement in effect for the personnel at the public school that would need to be waived or modified for the public school to implement its identified innovations. This provision should be removed from the bill, and it's unnecessary and questionable as to why it exists in House Bill 609, other than the fact that it comes from model legislation developed by the American Legislative Exchange Council, or ALEC. Proponents of HB 609 acknowledged during the House hearing that the New Hampshire Department of Education lacks the authority to waive provisions of a collective bargaining agreement, rendering this cookie cutter language from the ALEC bill senseless. If a school district wanted to make a change that required an adaptation in working conditions, there's nothing from stopping them today from seeking a waiver or negotiating a change to a CBA with a school employee bargaining unit. Additional concerns for NEA New Hampshire include, but are not limited to, the overly broad language, which leaves questions around whether this bill allows a waiver of important special education, English as a second language, dropout prevention services, curriculum and academic standards that allow the drawdown of federal funds, a school's assessment plan, which must meet federal requirements, or the federal government would have grounds to place schools or districts on at-risk status and withhold federal funds. And also graduation policies, which cannot conflict with federal reporting requirements or policies. When the bill broadly states on page 4, line 20 to 21, that upon the designation of innovation school or school zone, the school board shall waive compliance with any administrative rules specified in the local district plan. This begs the question as to whether there's any limit as to what rules the board can waive. Can the state board approve a waiver of IDEA compliance? Is this saying the board can waive compliance of Department of Labor rules around building safety or employment? These questions went regrettably unanswered at the hearing in the House. Innovation can and does happen in New Hampshire public schools when you engage with the stakeholders who are part of the public education in our state. The text of this bill is lifted from model legislation from a Washington, D.C. think tank, which is why it's unsurprisingly broad, confusing, and creates really more questions than it does solutions. I strongly urge this committee to find House Bill 609 an expedient to legislate, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Questions from the committee members? Seeing none.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Ms.
Thank you.
Tuttle.
I will send in written testimony as well.
That will be great. Thank you.
Madam Chair, the prime sponsor is with us now.
Okay. Representative Cordelli.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm sorry I'm late to the hearing. We're trying to shuttle people in and out from our executive session.
Yeah, I understand.
For the record, my name is Glenn Cordelli, and I represent Tufton Borough, Moulton Borough, and Sandwich in the beautiful Lakes region. And I am pleased to be here before the Senate Education Committee to discuss HB 609. And let me just start out by saying I've heard this previously, that this is model legislation from ALEC, a Washington think tank, and it's not true. Unless someone was looking over my shoulder when I was working on this, it's not true. My primary source in coming up with this legislation was looking at the Colorado legislation and talking to people in Colorado about their innovative schools project. I have 2 children and a granddaughter in Colorado, so I try and spend some time out there as much as I can, and I've talked to people there. So we've heard all along that charter schools are laboratories of innovation, and that's part of their statement of purpose, actually, in legislation. And we have also heard that they have an advantage in that they do not have to follow all the administrative rules that traditional public schools do. I'll just mention that the table of contents for New Hampshire administrative rules is 24 pages long, just a table of contents. In terms of the bill itself, I would point out that this is the ultimate in local control, I believe. in that everything starts with a local school or school district coming up with ideas for innovation and looking at the possibility of giving waivers from specific administrative rules. And the process starts out with a group from the school or the district going before this local school board. There's a public hearing on the plan that is being presented. There is a vote by the local school board whether to proceed or not with the program. And I think in that regard, it's total local control benefit legislation. Each plan for the innovation is the bill lays out some of the things that might be included in the plan. And that can vary based on what the needs of the local community and school board are. From the local passage of a proposal of a plan, it goes to the Department of Education, where the department would review the plan and suggest changes or additions possibly to the plan. When ready, the local school board would then submit the plan to the State Board of Education for review. And again, another public hearing. The State Board of Education holds a public hearing on the legislation. They would then offer a written explanation of their decision to the local board, whether they pass or reject the plan. Down the line, there is follow-up and monitoring of the plan, both at the local district level, who can modify the plan at any point, revise the plan based on what they are seeing. And likewise, the state board is responsible for review every 2 years of the plan and whether the plan is meeting the objectives that were laid out by the local district. The Department of Education also prepares a report on the innovation plans and submits that to the governor and to the legislature based on what they see happening with these innovation plans. So I think that this presents opportunities for local districts. It is keeping with local control, and I think that there are sufficient accountability measures provided for in the legislation as well. And I thank you for your time this morning, and I would welcome any questions.
Thank you very much, Representative Cordelli. Any questions from the committee members? Senator Prentice.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Cordelli, for efficiently moving between meetings this morning. I know it can be a busy time. So I was curious, there's no fiscal note attached to this. It said that they weren't able to complete one at the time. Is there anything updated on the fiscal side of this?
I do not believe so. I don't know.
It says when completed the fiscal note, will be forwarded to the House Clerk's office. I guess you can check with them.
I'm not aware of anything related to a fiscal note for this bill.
Okay. On follow-up, Madam Chair.
Follow-up.
So
go ahead.
Thank you again, Representative Cordelli, help me out with this. So within the local control and this innovation school or innovation zone, would local school funds be utilized to fund this initiative?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I think that depends on what the plan is. There are certainly plans, I would imagine, that might require some local expenditure funds, but I'm sure other plans which would not. If it's a simple rule change that they're requesting a waiver from, maybe a number of days, hours, there could be a myriad of things that they could request a waiver from as part of a plan. And so I can see some plans not requiring any funding at all.
Okay. Madam Chair, just one more. Thank you, Representative Cordelli. And you mentioned earlier Colorado, and that's where you have family there. You've spent time there, and you've gotten this idea, and it helped you in drafting this bill. So, what's your impression or your experience with the innovation schools and innovation school zones in Colorado? Something must have inspired you to bring this forward. So I'm interested to hear what you're hearing in Colorado.
Sure, thank you. Basically, while visiting family there, I attended a conference, an education conference, and actually talked to people. They, after a period, set up an office within the Department of Education for innovation projects. And I talked to some of the people there, and that's what started me out with the idea of doing something similar back here in New Hampshire. I would be glad to send one of their annual reports to you if you'd like.
Sure. Actually, that would be very helpful. Thank you, Representative Cordelli, for answering my questions, and best of luck today. Thank you.
Thank
Senator.
you. You too.
Madam Chair.
Any other questions from committee members? Senator Khan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Greetings, Representative.
Good morning.
I don't know if you heard the testimony from Ms. Tuttle. She was raising some questions about, in particular, page 2 and lines 8 through 11. It has to do with teacher recruitment, employment, evaluation, compensation, assessment, matters that likely are covered in a collective bargaining agreement. So how do you reconcile? I think she raised the question, but how do you, as the bill author, reconcile what might be in a negotiated agreement with the ability of a school board to have an innovation plan that redefines things that might likely be part of that collective bargaining agreement?
Thank you, Senator. I would certainly expect that any plan that was developed locally that impacted a collective bargaining agreement would have to be renegotiated with that bargaining unit. That question also came up in House testimony, and I believe it was the lawyer from the department said that they would have no ability to approve a plan that had a unilateral change to a bargaining agreement. And excuse me, references to the bargaining agreement in here would be simply for a matter of transparency as part of the plan, so that if there was a negotiated a change to a bargaining union agreement, that it should be stated as such in the plan. But certainly that's the extent of it. And I would say I have seen reports from Colorado where actually at least one innovation plan that I had seen, I forget which school district it was, they actually went back and negotiated as part of their plan an increase in salary for teachers. So that was specified in their innovation plan.
Good. Thank you. couple more.
Follow up?
We could follow.
Okay.
So the House, when it considered the bill, it has a fiscal note or FN on the bill. There was no House Finance hearing. And I guess I just want to understand, is there a waiving procedure in the House that as a result, there was no hearing in Finance? I just, fill me in there.
As I recall, I don't even recall if there was a fiscal note actually attached and what it said, but I'm sure you would have that. But I think that if there was any fiscal note, it was an indeterminable cost, and so therefore was not sent on to Finance by leadership.
Senator Hennessy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Representative Cordelli, for joining us today. Madam Chair, I think that maybe the Department of Education would be able to answer Senator Khan's question.
Yes, because they were supposed to give some information. It's waiting information from the Department of Education. So we have Ms. Fenton is here. She could probably answer that question. Is Ms. Fenton there? No.
I don't believe so.
She said she would be here. Anybody else from DOE?
Natasha Lupiani?
Okay, that will be fine. Ms. Lupiani, can you answer this question?
No, I was going to say, if you hold on 1 minute, I can get Diana for you. If you hold on, if you're willing to wait just a minute, I can grab her for you.
Okay.
On the House setting, House committee right now. Hold on.
Madam Chairman, if there are any more questions for me, I'd be glad to take that in the interim.
Yeah, I don't know what Senator Khan has another question, I think.
Yeah, one more. Representative, you had said that this bill is the ultimate in local control. I'm trying to think of parallels to this that I might find in our statutes. I'm thinking we've got a lot of environmental regulations, water, safety, for instance, that are guide local control, public health relative to inspections and the like, criminal statutes relative to smoking ordinances or the like that control local behavior. Why do you suppose we did this for education? And do we have any parallels to this in other sections of New Hampshire state law?
Thank you. Nothing comes to mind off the top of my head, but I think I made that statement because this starts out with a local plan, with a group of people at a local school or a local district getting together and brainstorming and coming up with an idea and advancing it through the local board and public hearings, et cetera. So in that fashion, I think it's truly a local initiative and a local control plan that is being put forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Cordelli. I think we're waiting for Diana Fenton from the DOE to answer some of those fiscal questions.
She is
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. There she is. Thank you. Ms. Fenton, thank you very much for getting here. I don't know how. So do you have the questions that were asked, or should we ask them again?
If you could repeat, I would appreciate the committee's indulgence.
Okay. Senator Khan, you had questions.
I think the two questions, greetings, Ms. Fenn. Two questions that's come up. One is we don't have a fiscal note from the department, and what is the status of that? And then second, there is an FN on this. There was no finance committee hearing in the House. And do you know what the House's view on that was? We asked that of Representative Cordelli and didn't really understand unless it was tied to the fact that there was no fiscal note. But there seemed to be a lot of, there could be a lot of rules being waived, a lot of plans being submitted, the floor constantly always rising on this bill. And so wondering what the department's view is on a fiscal note.
So thank you for the question, and thank you for reiterating the question. So looking back in my records, we did do a fiscal note on this bill. In terms of where that is in the process, I will have to dig that up for you, for lack of a better term, Senator Khan. But I can tell you that the department, we did prepare a fiscal note, which I reviewed, and I believe that we submitted through our general process. And I'm just kind of looking to see what it was. I believe, in large part, it was very difficult to anticipate the fiscal impact of this bill, just because it is a significant overhaul, if you will, and we're not sure where all the changes and costs will be. I think the one thing that we were able to articulate with clarity is that if these innovative schools were to pass, similar to the charter school bill, at some point the department would anticipate needing to have a staff person to oversee it, similar to how we have the charter school program. So that is the first answer to your question, and I will follow up with you, Senator, to find out where exactly that fiscal note is. As to the second part of your question, I think you kind of answered it in the question, which is go to House Finance, presumably because there had not been a fiscal note attached. But that's as far as I can go with that. I know that that was a concern that House members expressed. I think that was part of the deliberation. I think that's part of the record. And I hope that answers your question.
It does. I think you're tracking down that fiscal note for us, for the record. And this does have an FN. I think if there is a cost to it, I think the Senate would, I think I understand how the Senate would treat that. And anyway, I thank you for following up with us.
Are you all set, Senator Khan?
I am.
Okay, anybody else has a question for Ms. Fenton? I guess you're off. Go back to what you were doing. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming over. Whatever. So.
Okay, we have a
Anybody
couple.
else?
Yes, we have a couple more speakers. Barrett, Christina.
Oh, yeah, okay. Mr. Christina.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. Thank you again, members of the committee. For the record, Barrett Christina, Executive Director of the New Hampshire School Boards Association. While we are in opposition to House Bill 609, we would certainly entertain perhaps a study committee of some sort. As Representative Cordelli mentioned, these innovation schools are in a number of states. I believe some testimony in House Education stated that they're in about maybe 12 or 14 states right now. So I think it would maybe be prudent before the legislature jumps into creating a new program. Maybe we spend some time over the summer or over the fall looking at data and information as to how other states have been treating these. So our opposition is not so much to the concept. We appreciate Representative Cordelli's comments about local control and putting this in the hands of local school boards. Our concerns with the bill are that we believe, as written, it's a little too broad and a little too vague in some sections. And I'll go through a couple of those quickly. For example, on page 1, line 15, where it says a public school of a school district may submit to its local school board an innovation plan. I want to know what they mean by a public school. And I think Representative Cordelli did mention in his testimony a few minutes ago that maybe a group of teachers or the principal could get together and submit these recommendations to the local school board. But I think that should be clarified what they mean by a public school. Page 1, line 30, it says a local school board may initiate and collaborate with one or more public schools to create innovation plans. I'm not sure that that's prohibited by law right now. I think that, regionally or perhaps within an SAU, superintendents are already and school boards are getting creative and sort of sharing services to minimize fiscal impact, but yet still produce strong educational outcomes. One of the other concerns that NHSBA has is the language about requesting. I think I'm on page 2, line 12, where the plan that's submitted to the department has to list what rules the local school board of the plan is seeking to waive. I think that's a little too broad, and that should be narrowed down as to what particular rules may be allowed to waive. For example, we have health and safety regulations scattered throughout multiple Department of Education regulations. And I would certainly hope that a school board would not submit a plan to the state board to waive health and safety of students. And I certainly would not expect the State Board of Education to accept that proposal to waive health and safety of students. But I think it just highlights the point that that's a little bit too broad, and maybe the bill should narrow down as to what specific regulations could possibly waive. And I know that there's some examples, faculty recruitment, employment evaluation, so on and so forth. We share the comments by Ms. Tuttle of NEA and Representative Cordelli that issues relative to collective bargaining agreements, the department does not have any authority to waive those. And if there were changes requested through the innovation plan that impacted collective bargaining, that would have to be renegotiated by the teachers union and the paraprofessionals and the local school board. Continuing on, I think relative to the bill itself, those are NHSBA's primary concerns. We appreciate the idea that we're looking at innovative and new ways to provide education for school, but two quick last points. This seems to also be creating another program when we have a program that already meets these needs. Our charter school statute, RSA 194B, does allow for local creation of charter schools. To my knowledge, there's only one or two of charter schools in the state right now that have been approved by local voters and approved by local school boards. But that's sort of the gist of this. Do we know that charter schools were introduced to relax some of the regulatory requirements in hopes that they would be able to innovate, to expand, to try new programs without having to be locked into some of the Department of Education regulations. So, but my point being is that already exists. A local school board or local school district can already create a charter school that's exempt from certain requirements. So I'm not sure why we need a new program for these innovation schools when if voters wanted to, they could create local charter schools within their own local school districts. The other aspect to that is I guess the real gist of this is that rather than creating a new program or replicating the charter school program, we think it would be more prudent for the legislature to look at what regulations are impeding school districts from either being innovative or from not being able to serve the needs of the students within their school district. The legislature can certainly control that. And if there are rules that the Department of Education has adopted that are inhibiting school districts, that are holding school districts back and preventing school districts from being innovative, let's look at those rules and perhaps pass legislation that waives some of those rules. So with that, as I said, NHSBA is opposed to the bill as written. We'd be happy to maybe see this go to a study committee where we could get data nationwide from other states that have been doing this. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from committee members? Senator Prentice.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Christina, for joining us again. Not a question, but just a point of interest for you. And committee members received an email from a Mary Wilkie, and she actually almost point by point support. It's like some of your testimony came out in here, but she talks about charter schools. Aren't they supposed to be the incubators of innovation? As well as points to some of the federal money that's come to the state for charter schools to increase the number of seats, and speaks also to if there are problems with the regulations, maybe we should be fixing those. So I was just looking through some of these emails this morning, and when you started testifying, it reminded me of Ms. Wilkie's email to the committee. So thank you very much. Just wanted to share those points with you.
Ms. Wilkie did not do my homework for me, but thank you.
There once was a school teacher in Lebanon by the last name of Wilkie, so it's possible.
Yes, I do know Ms. Wilkie. Yeah.
Oh, okay. No, I didn't think she did. I just thought that was interesting that this just kind of it reminded me, and so I wanted to pull it out and share it with you and members of the committee as a reminder.
Thank you,
point. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Prentice. Senator DeShardy, did you have a question?
No.
Okay, I thought I saw your hand up there. Anybody else with a question for Mr. Christina? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of the committee.
Okay, next we have Michael O'Brien.
Mr. O'Brien, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Michael O'Brien. I am a lobbyist at Pretty Strategies and here representing my client, the American Federation of Teachers in New Hampshire. I'll make this brief. I know I'm one of the last speakers in a longer day than anticipated. So just want to say quickly, we agree with the points that President Tuttle made at the beginning of testimony on 609, especially around the collective bargaining piece. I do want to point out that if you do a simple Google of innovation schools and ALEC, you see the bill that is in front of you. So while Representative Cordelli may not have pulled it, maybe he pulled it from Colorado, it appears Colorado has in fact pulled it from ALEC. So you can see that bill almost line for line on their website. Also, since Colorado was referenced, I do think it's worth, and I can send this to the committee, there was a Denver Post article that was published in 2019 that talks about how the test scores in innovation schools are static as compared to those in what we'll call them normal public schools. And that there hasn't been any increase in outcomes due to the schools. So innovation status. So I want to point that out as well, and happy to send that article to the committee. I also just want to say, as a husband of a teacher, I've watched my wife over the last year, who, by the way, is a harder worker than I'll ever be. And I say that full well knowing that that is correct. Innovate at every level of her classroom. Due to COVID and the pandemic and the way she taught her students. But even outside of that, my wife has been in a public school now for 7 years. 3 times in those 7 years, she has taken advantage of a program within her collective bargaining unit to create a new class that isn't available currently to the students, including this year, where her and a co-teacher at her school, English and social studies are taught together as one. So you teach, what was happening literary as it corresponds to what was going on during history. And her and her co-teacher have decided that that's a great class and they love it, but they need a new class for folks who have social and economic or social learning disabilities in order to make that work. And so they got approval from their administration. They're sitting down, they're putting together a curriculum. They're going to propose that to the administration, who can propose it to the school board, and that class can be approved. This will be the 3rd time. She's also a theater teacher. She brought theater to her school. They didn't have a theater class, so she created a curriculum and brought it. we see innovation in our schools already, and to say in this bill that we don't is frankly offensive to the teachers who spend their time making this innovation happen already at a local level. So I just want to say that. I'm sorry if you can hear my son crying in the background. He is home from school today, wasn't feeling well, and since he brought me both of his blankets for nap, I think he's telling me it's time for bed. But I'm happy to take any questions from the committee.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much for testifying.
So the last person that I had signed up to speak was Carl Ladd, but I don't see him in the attendees column. So if he is here, or if anyone else would like to speak to House Bill 609, please raise your hand now. I don't see any hands, Madam Chair.
Okay. I think in that case, that will conclude the hearing on House Bill 609. My suggestion is that we go into executive session. I think we have 2 bills that we can exec. And I'll tell you the numbers, and if you don't think so, then let me know. I'm thinking about 304 and 513. So do I have a vote to go into executive session?
I'll move go into executive session.
Thank you. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Senator Rishardi. So we are in executive session. Yes.
We have roll call.
Pardon?
Roll
And
call.
roll call. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I was at a meeting last night and they said, anybody just raise their hand and I count them instead of calling out each name. Okay, Senator Rishardi.
Yes.
Senator Prentice.
Yes.
Senator Hennessy.
Yes.
Senator Khan.
Yes.
And Senator Ward. Chair votes yes. 513, we have already voted on in the Senate and it has passed the House. I would like to have it pass here again, and I will check out and find out how we deal with a bill that is very similar and has gone through both House and Senate and what we do with it. But I think it's a good thing to put it out. Senator Prentice.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So would we want to just hold on to this and get respectfully clarification on what it is, what the best pathway forward would be, rather than just pass it again since it's already passed the Senate? And I'm just looking for your advice and committee members, as I'm still new to this. What would seems like you.
There was some question earlier. What do you do when you have a similar bill that passes both houses and then comes back? So I can easily do that and have an answer for you before next Tuesday, if you feel more comfortable doing it that way.
Anyone
Madam
else?
Chair?
Yes, Senator Hennessy.
So this has happened to me before, and the Senate held on to one of their bills. So we could pass this out, and if the resolution is to that, we just table it. If you're looking to get this out of the committee. If not, then we can wait for the answer.
Well, I would like to get it out because I don't think there's really not much else we can do with it. Just to have one bill less on our desk. But I go with, whatever you feel most comfortable with. I know there are ways of handling it. I don't know right now what it is.
I apologize.
Would you like me to wait? Would you like me to wait? Do I hear a motion?
Move on to pass.
Ought to pass by Senator Hennessy. Is there a second? Second by Rishardi. Senator Prentice?
Oh, voted, yeah. Yes.
You want to, yes, Senator Khan?
No.
And Senator Ward, well, yes, so there's 4-1.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
So we need to do the full roll. So I have Senator Hennessy first. Motion moved it all to pass, seconded by Senator Ricciardi. I have Senator Prentice as a yes, Senator Khan is a no, and I have you as a yes. So we need Senator Ricciardi and Senator Hennessy's vote.
I thought I had that. Ricciardi?
Yes.
Senator Hennessy?
Yes.
Okay, so it's 4-1. And I will take care of it. What is your objection, Senator Khan?
I'm going to be consistent with the way that I voted when it came through the first time.
I see. Okay, fair enough.
And Madam Chair, just to confirm, you said you'll take that out?
Yes, I will take it out.
Okay.
Okay, that takes care of that one. Senate Bill 304. That is the one establishing a committee to study the funding of tuition and transportation of career technical education. It seemed to me that was fairly straightforward, and I did not hear any big objections to it. Senator Prentice?
One to move ought to pass.
Senator Prentice says ought to pass. I'll second it. Senator Ricciardi?
Yes.
Senator Hennessy?
Yes.
Senator Khan?
Yes.
Senator Ward, yes. So that's 5-0. Put it on consent?
Move consent.
Second.
Madam Chair, did we get Senator Prentice's vote?
Yes.
Senator Prentice?
I did move ought to pass, but but I will vote yes. So just for clarification, thank you.
So this is
Madam
on,
Chair. Yeah.
this is on, move it to consent.
All right,
And I think you said yes, and Senator Khan said was seconding. Yes, no?
No, I moved the question of consent, so I haven't voted yet.
So the vote we just took was ought to pass. And then it was motioned by Senator Prentice, seconded by Senator Ward, and then we did the vote.
Yeah.
And now it's 5-0.
Yep.
And then Senator Hennessy moved it consent, and then I don't have a second.
I see. Okay. Do I have a second? Senator Khan? Senator Khan is second. Senator Ricciardi?
Yes.
Senator Hennessy?
Yes.
And Senator Ward says yes. So we put it on consent. Thank you very much. That is it for today.
Madam Chair, we
Yes.
still have, Senator Prentice and Senator Khan need to vote on consent.
Senator Prentice?
Yes.
Senator Khan?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So that's 5-0. Who wants to take it out?
Take it.
I'll take it out.
Hennessy will take it out. Okay, I need the motion to get out of executive session.
So moved.
Moved by Senator Prentice.
Second.
Who was that? Hennessy? Seconded by Hennessy. Okay. Get out of executive session. Senator Ricciardi?
Yes.
Senator Khan?
Yes.
Senator Ward, yes. So that's 5-0. And now what do we else have to do to adjourn?
Madam Chair, so we still need Senator Prentice's and Senator Hennessy's vote. So the moving is different than the roll call. So we'll still need to get all 5 votes for the roll call.
I thought I did that.
So when it's moved by someone and seconded, then we get the roll call of all 5 members.
Yeah.
So
I
I'm
thought I
sorry.
went through all of them again. Okay, so who did not get called then, Ava?
Senator Hennessy and Senator Prentice.
Okay, Senator Prentice?
Yes.
Senator Hennessy?
Yes.
Are we all set now? Do we move to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Senator Prentice, Senator Hennessy, second. Okay, let me go backwards. Senator Hennessy?
Yes.
Senator Prentice?
Yes.
Senator Khan?
Yes.
Senator Ricciardi?
Yes.
And Senator Ward vote yes. We are adjourned. Thank you very much. We'll see you
Thank you,
next.
Madam Chair.
We'll see you
Thank you.
Thursday.
See some of you later.
Yep.